To determine how we multiply negative numbers, well, let's start off by seeing what happens when we take a negative number times a positive number. We already know that when we multiply by a positive number, it's just repeatedly adding that thing together. So if we were to take negative 5 times 3, this is the same as having negative 5 3 times, and just adding them together. And using our rules for addition, well, negative 5 plus negative 5 is negative 10. Add another negative 5 to that, we get negative 15. So negative 5 times 3 is negative 15. You can see when we take a negative number times a positive number, we end up with a negative number. All right. To figure out what happens when we take a negative number times a negative number, well, that gets a little bit more tricky because you can't really write up negative 5 a negative number of times. But we can see what happens with various patterns. And math is all about patterns. So if we took negative 5 times 3, we already just saw that that's negative 15. If we took negative 5 times 2, that would be negative 10. Negative 5 times 1 is negative 5, of course. Negative 5 times 0 is 0. And if you look at the pattern that's happening here, each time we're adding 5. Negative 15 plus 5 is negative 15 plus 5 is negative 10. This plus 5 is negative 5. Add 5 here, we get 0. Add 5 again, we get up to 5. So an interesting thing happens. If we take two negative numbers and we multiply them together, we actually get a positive number. So this is another instance of kind of the two negatives canceling each other out. It's kind of a different, kind of the same instances when we were subtracting a negative number. So let's just do a couple examples. 3 times 2 is 6. We have one negative number, so the result is negative. You can actually expand, I guess. I said if both numbers have the same sign, the result is positive. So either both positive or both negative. If one of them has a negative and the other one's positive, then the result is negative. So if we're in one of these situations, the result is negative. I don't know what I'm writing. All right. So in both of those situations, we end up with a positive. In both of these situations, we end up with a negative. We could actually extend this and say, just count up the number of negative signs. If we have 0, 2, 4, if we have an even number of negative signs, they'll cancel each other out. We'll end up with a positive number. If we have an odd number of negative signs, 1, 3, 5, then a bunch of them will cancel each other out in pairs, and we'll be left with one negative. So there will eventually, there will be one negative left over. So in this case, you can see there's two negatives. So the result, well, 4 times 8 is 32. The two negatives will cancel each other out. We end up with a positive 32. That's the way you can ultimately think about these. That's the easiest way. All right, if we want to multiply these two fractions, remember multiplying fractions, you multiply straight across the top and straight across the bottom, but it's nice to kind of just put them together like this to see the cancellation. You can cancel a factor of 2, giving us 1 over 6. But I kind of ignored the negative here, so I should probably come back and do that. The negative times the positive should be a negative number, so we end up with a negative 1/6 here. A negative 4 times 7, well, 4 times 7 is 28. A negative times a positive gives me a negative 28.